Thank you so much for coming along to Five from the Archive with the wonderful Stan Farrow. We were beset by technical problems and audio issues during the recording of this podcast, so it's taken us absolutely ages to get it ready and online. Please do enjoy it. We love Stan's work on Camversation. There are some exceptional images in this podcast. And a super quick plug to say that Stan is back with a pair of brand new presentations later this year that look at his workflow, his approaches, his editing, and also how he creates his physical backgrounds as well. It's really different. Okay, so Stan, thank you so much for coming along to do this. I really appreciate it. I consider you such a good friend, a great supporter of the community, and I really thoroughly enjoy your photography as well. So it's a guilty pleasure for me on all fronts. So thanks very much for coming along to share your Five from the Archive.
Delighted. Delighted. You don't know what you're going to get yet, but we'll see.
That's why I didn't want to see them beforehand. I wanted to see them raw.
Okay.
Stan, would you mind? I know a little bit about you. I know a little bit about your background, and I know we've got a similar background in some ways. But would you mind talking to us a little bit more about yourself, your background, how you got into photography, how you got to where you are now, really, if that's okay?
I bought my first camera when I was really young. I was about 10, I think, and it cost me 10 and 6. Great fortune, and I had to save up my pocket money for ages for that. But I used photography throughout my teaching career. I taught biology for many years. And then in the mid-80s, I woke up to the fact that there was chaos going on around me because I was in charge of a biology department and there were classes being unattended. And in the middle of this mayhem, as I was sorting out other people's classes as well as my own, the head teacher appeared outside the lab, the window of my lab, pruning the roses. I thought, this is surreal. And so I went home with steam coming out of my ears, and my wife said to me, "There's this job in the paper today." So I moved out of secondary teaching into higher education. And to cut a long story short, I ended up in the University of St Andrews, running the admissions office when Prince William came as a student, which was fun. So we had all sorts of mayhem there as well, because we had break-ins and bomb threats and goodness knows what else. However, I took early retirement in 2005, and I wanted something to do. And at that point, I turned to photography. And I studied art history, thinking I was going to do a postgraduate degree in history and practice of photography. But by the time I'd done some art history to get the arts qualifications to do this, they had discontinued the degree. So everything dates from then, really. And that's it.
Oh, do you think your science background has informed drastically your photography moving forward? And the reason I'm asking that is because a lot of your photography or a lot of the photography that you've shown us on Camversation it can be very abstract and it can be very structural and geometric. Do you feel that there's your element of science coming through a lot of your photography as well?
Probably. I am quite methodical about my photography. I do spend a lot of time just tweaking individual images and getting them the way I want. You'd be surprised how long sometimes I spend on just getting the tonation right and touching out a shadow here and adding a vignette there. So, yeah, probably you're right.
Yeah, thank you. And is that is that therapeutic for you when you get to that point, when you see all of that? Or is that kind of just part of it to get to your...
I do enjoy the post-processing work a lot. Yeah. So I've got files that go back now. I had some from 21 that I was looking at over the last couple of days. And I'm pulling out files and thinking, I can work on that. And so then you take one file and you spend an hour or two on that, and then you move on to the next one.
Yeah, and that's the best thing about post-processing, isn't it? You can always go back and replay. And there's a great adage in never deleting any images because you never know how you're going to use them as well.
Yeah. I never delete anything, which means I've got terabytes and terabytes of...
I bet. Thank you.
Yeah, don't know what I'm going to do. I could leave my hard disks in my will to somebody.
It's funny you should say that. The local society in Faversham was left hundreds of thousands of slides and photographs by a couple of photographers. And obviously the next stage would be leaving hard drives. So I think that's the next stage, leaving SSD drives, disks and hard drives. That's probably not going to be unusual stuff. Okay, Stan, thank you so much for sharing your 5 from the archive. And this is your first one. And I'll be honest, this is something I hadn't expected, Stan. So I'm going to look forward to hearing about what this is all about. I'll pass over to you to start whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Okay, a few years ago, many years ago, when I took early retirement, I joined St Andrew's Photographic Society. And what happened then was that within a year or two, I ended up being president. And during my time as president, we had one evening when we had a portrait session. And this young fellow was one of the models for the evening. And he came along and he posed for everybody else. And right at the end of the evening, everybody else was packing up. And I took a couple of photos of him. This was one of them. And then it was straight photograph. And then it sat in my files for the best part of a year. I knew when I photographed him, I wanted to get that confrontational look where he was staring at me, but I hadn't a clue what I was going to do with it. And it sat in my files for a year or two, and then I fished it out, as I'm prone to do every so often, and thought, I've got to do something with this. And so at the time, I sandwiched it with some tiles from a fallen-in roof on an old cottage, and I used his skin tones to color the tiles. In those days, my Photoshop skills weren't as good as they are just now, and I hadn't any idea what a layer mask was. And so it was all done with carefully, painstakingly cutting things out and erasing things using the eraser tool, which took forever. However, it seemed to work for me. I needed a title for it. I called it Metamorphosis. And it went away to my first ever salon that I entered in, must have been about 2006. And I was surprised that it got a gold medal. It's won a few gold medals since. And this portrait hangs on the wall of my dining room. So
See why.
really, I don't often do portraits, but this was one of them.
This is what surprised me about this, actually, Stan, because I have an idea in my mind as to the kind of images that you show us a lot on Camversation. And portraiture really isn't what I would expect. So thank you so much. This is an excellent, absolutely outstanding image. When you said you went back to it after a certain amount of time, as you said you're prone to do, what caused that? What made you think, I've got an idea?
I don't know. I never know really what, I put things into files and then every so often I browse through them and see what's in the files, and I came across it and thought, I must do something with this, but what? And so you start thinking about it and you start looking at other images, and the tiles I'd taken on a holiday on the west coast of Scotland, and it just gelled in my mind. I can't describe why I put particular images together, but they seem to work for me.
They really do work beautifully. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Should we move on to your next one?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is more towards what?
Again, this one is called Sugar for My Coffee. And I don't know what prompted this one either. It's not quite as simple as it seems. It took a little bit of doing, but I wanted to create something that was almost black and white. And so we've got 2 sheets of paper, one black and one white, and the coffee cup carefully placed in an appropriate place, and then the sugar cubes. I think this was stimulated by it. We were given sugar cubes. Somebody was throwing them out and said, "Oh, you'll want these." I didn't know what to do with them. It was really difficult to hold the exposure on the sugar cubes to get some details of the granulations in the top surfaces of them. And the cup itself with the coffee, it was still the black coffee, but I needed that swirl of cream. And the swirl of cream is smoke from a joss stick that's been twirled in Photoshop and put in place. And this one hangs it's laminated and it hangs in our kitchen wall. And it won a gold medal in Edinburgh, I think, one year.
Thank you. And I can see this is where your meticulous attention to detail comes in as well, Stan, doesn't it? Because I imagine, I'm going to make an assumption here, but I imagine the handle of that coffee cup is at precisely 90 degrees to the
It is. It is.
Wow. Would
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
The other thing about it is that when you photograph liquid in a cup, to get it as concentric circles, you've got to have your camera point straight down. So when you've got it off to one side, as it is here, then you're kind of shooting a bit diagonally, and it doesn't work out. So the liquid in the cup had to be photographed immediately below the camera and then copied and pasted to that particular position to get everything concentric.
Yeah, goodness me. I guess we're a real labour of love. Dare I ask you how long this took, Stan, or is that the question that we don't ask?
It probably took me an hour or two. Yeah.
Worth it. Absolutely worth it. Outstanding shot. Thank you very much.
Okay. We'll look at number 3 then, will we?
Yes, please. Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you.
I'll call this one Ghosts. Then this one has done relatively well for me. I've put it in this presentation because it's typical of some of the stuff that I do. And it's one of a series that I did with these butterflies. I had 2 samples of butterflies, and this blue and brown one was the most colorful of them. And I think I'd bought them as preserved specimens where they had been ethically bred and provided for me. So I then arranged it on a background of that I constructed myself. The background is a piece of painted MDF, and it's got a little square of cardboard in the middle that's been stuck down with PVA glue. But there's more to it than that, obviously. The wings at either side are the same butterfly, but they're inverted. And the photograph of the macro lens. So they come in from either side as pale copies of the original blue and brown wings. And then into that, we've got, what else have we got? We've got some writing there from an old legal document. And that's typical of some of my work. You're not supposed to read it. You find some people say, well, I've read so far and I couldn't read any more. But in fact, it's not there to be read. It's there to just add some interest, some texture to it. What I tend to do with that is I copy the old legal text and then I paste it into my image using darken mode, and I apply a layer mask to it, and then put a filter into the layer mask, a bounce filter, so it comes and goes. And we've also got to one side these honeycomb shapes, which again done the same way. You photograph them as a dark pattern, and then you put it in with using darken mode, and then you play a clouds filter in a layer mask. And you tone these things down. You're really adjusting the opacity of it down to 35, 30%, something like that. And around the outside, you'll see it's the watercolor edge. And how I'm creating that is I'll take out black ink or black paint, and I'll roughly paint a square and photograph that, leaving the edges quite rough on the white background. And so when I photograph that and I'll put it on as a layer, I'll adjust the blending mode of that to screen. And lo and behold, the black suddenly miraculously vanishes, just leaving the white edges. And that's how that one's done.
Yeah, these are absolutely beautiful. These are almost your, I don't want to say signature because I suppose that's the wrong phrase, but these are the images that I think perhaps you're probably best known for. Certainly when I started looking at your work as well, Stan, all those years ago, and I know you are so equally adept at abstract, I think these are the ones which are easily attributable to you, I think.
This sort of thing I like most, I think.
And that idea of making an image significantly more powerful than the one you started with, just using the butterfly. I don't mean this in a negative sense, but using the butterfly and then using the butterfly in several ways to make more of the image, adding extra layers, adding extra elements, just adding all those extra bits of interest, I think really make these stand out. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Look at another one.
Oh, yes, please. I'm loving this.
Okay. This I call Rose in December. In our house, we constantly got roses in the house, but quite often when they get past their best, there's a stopping off place before they end up in the dustbin, and the stopping off place is my computer room. And so I do the sort of textures and colors that you get from roses as they begin to fade and begin to decay. And so this was photographed on another constructed background. And basically, we'll talk about the background first, perhaps. It's 2 sheets of MDF, one of which has a circle cut in it. And then the two are stuck together with PVA glue. And then the edges are softened by sanding down a bit, but also I use artist's texture paste. It's a sort of paste that you get from art shops, and you spread it on with a plastic card, credit card, or something like that, and let it dry. You can sand it down and you can paint it. And so it's probably been painted with acrylic paint. I use a sort of warm grey acrylic paint, and I tend to mix that with titanium white and dilute it and put it on as a thin coat. So that was the background constructed. Then I'll do two photographs. I'll photograph the background, and then without moving my camera or the background, I'll put the rose and the petals in place, and then I'll photograph it a second time. And so I can then use that sort of combination to cut through the top layer with a layer mask to get the stem to fade out a bit. There's a bit of blurring goes on in these things, so you create an image, you blur it, but you as a layer, but you cut through and make sure that there's some sharp places in it. So if you look at the rose, for example, the edges of it here are blurred, but the center of it here is quite sharp, and then the stem blurs away to nothing. And on top of it, what have we got? We've got writing from an old legal document. Again, it's probably somebody's last will and testament. And I buy these things on eBay. You can pay a fortune for them, but you can also get them for about £5. Choose the ones that, what should we say, handwritten from about 1850. And also choose ones that aren't written on blue paper. Try to go for ones that are written on white paper. And again, what you're doing there with is take a copy of that writing and then putting it on as a layer using darken mode. And same goes for the scratches added into it here. And so I'm using darken mode to apply the scratches. And looking at it again, there's probably texture in there. And it looks to me as if the texture is an old rusty metal garage door that I photographed 2 years ago in Normandy. And you add that as a layer, but you choose soft light in the blending mode. And add a little bit of a vignette at the end, and Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful image as well. And those rusty doors are so handy, aren't they?
Oh, they are. They are. I should go back to Normandy just to photograph.
Absolutely. And I'm going to have to ask about the placement of the petals. Is that something that you put there straight away, got the right spot, or is it something that you photographed, moved a little bit, photographed? What was your approach in positioning those exactly where they needed to be?
I think I can't remember, to be honest, but I think I probably photographed the rose on its own and then thought it needed something else, and the two petals sort of fallen off in place. It wouldn't have been a lot of trial and error, but the first trial would probably be the rose on its own. No, it's a bit bare, and so it needed the petals to hang.
Yeah, thank you. Really interesting to know your workflow as well. And I know we're talking about you coming back and presenting a couple of sessions more about your workflow and Camversation, but it's really interesting to hear about your workflow here as well, Stan. Thank you very much. Another beautiful image. Is this anywhere, by the way? You haven't mentioned if this one's printed anywhere.
I put it into an exhibition I had in 2009, in 2019, just before COVID. And I don't think I've used it in one or two exhibitions. It's been into one or two salons, but I'm not sure it's done particularly well. But I like it.
Absolutely, yeah. That's what these are about. Thank you.
Okay. And number 5.
Oh my goodness, number 5 already. Thanks, Stan.
Yeah. I've put this in because it's one that I've been working on this week. Although it's one from my files from 21, but it was pulled out and I've worked on it just on Monday. And so, again, it's typical of some of that still life stuff of mine. The tin can I found, squashed tin can I found walking along a beach on Skye 2 years ago, and I collect things. I collect junk, and I brought it home, and it's figured in one or two photographs then. And then there are bits and pieces in there. If we start with the background again, the background is again a construction. And what have we got to that? It's based on a sheet of MDF. MDF is about 30 centimeters across. And what I've done with that is stuck down on top of it some crumpled black tissue paper. And I think probably in there, just here, underneath that is some muslin. That it gives a little bit of texture just there and here. And then on top of the tissue paper, I've got a square of torn paper with just text printed onto it. And then on top of that, just a bit of thin needle cardboard And I sourced that from Hobbycraft, I think. And what I've done with it is it's all stuck down, glued together with PVA glue. And then it's been painted again with that of warm grey and titanium white diluted acrylic paint. And I usually put that on with a brush or just rub it into place. Sometimes I'll add to it with watercolor pencils just to add shadows where I want them to be. So maybe there's a bit of watercolor pencil in here and in this corner here. So this background was originally used for something else. And so this square here, this rectangle of card could be a bit awkward unless I worked on that. So what I've done is taken some thin cord, and thread, and put some beads onto it. And that adds a little bit of interest if you, and the same thread is put round the tin can with a couple of beads on it here, and that's holding a label with the crucifix on it. The label is important because it provides a basis for the crucifix. Otherwise, it might get a bit lost in the texture of the tin can. And there's something about crucifixes and rosaries and things like that that adds a certain je ne sais quoi to my imagery. I'm not a religious person at all, but it does add something. I'm not quite sure how to describe it. So it ended up like that. And then we've got the watercolor edge created as before. It took me about, after it had been photographed and it was pulled out of the files on Monday, it took me about 2 hours to end up with it like this.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my question. I was going to say, how long are these labor of loves, especially because this is a more modern one, where perhaps you're used to that layering of techniques and different images and symbols and things.
Yeah, the first one that I showed you, I think it took me, the portrait, it took me the best part of 2 days, one way or another. So maybe about 12 hours of work. And now I'm working an hour or two.
Yeah. There'd be plenty of people, I'm sure, who are watching this who would love to produce something like this in an hour or two. Absolutely stunning. Really is. And it goes to show that you can pick up anything on the beach and make something that can tell a story from it as well.
Yeah, the trouble is that you end up with, rooms in your house and they're full of junk. I've had a row this week for the stuff I've left lying around the dining room.
I did say to someone on Camversation on the Facebook group, I'm not sure if you saw, someone shared their picture of their home studio. And I said, oh, if we wouldn't mind other people sharing the pictures. And it was absolutely phenomenal. It was like a tidal wave of mess. Stan, thanks so much for taking this time to go through your 5 from the archive, and also for talking to us about not only why they're important, but how you've gone about creating these, because they're really special, and it's lovely to know that you can have a bit of background, or we can have a bit of background around that as well.
Yeah.
I did mention that we may have some later workshops coming up from you, and I'll pop any information on the website about those. But one thing I did want to mention is that for all of the presentations, you prefer your fee to be sent to charity. And I didn't know if you wanted just to take a minute or so to talk about that, to let us know if people wanted to donate, what they could do as well.
Okay, I give my money to the MS Society. Multiple sclerosis is really a horrible disease that affects different people in different ways. And it's really peculiar in the sense that northern countries are more affected than closer to the equator. It affects different people in different ways. It's not thought to be hereditary, but there is an inherited part of it. But sometimes there's a trigger that triggers MS. So, for example, it might be the amalgam that you have in your fillings in your teeth. Something as simple as that. And there are more people in Scotland that suffer from MS than there are in England. And it's funny too that if you move south towards the equator before puberty, you acquire the chances of getting MS of the country you go to. But if you move after puberty, then you're stuck with the chances that you had in your original country. Really strange illness. For some people, it works quickly, and people suffer briefly but greatly, and other people go on for many years. Just depends on circumstances. So the MS Society does a lot of research, and they do a lot of support for people who suffer from the illness. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll pop a link to that in the description as well. And I'm really proud that we've been able to send hundreds of pounds on behalf of Stan to the MS Society.
It's been great. It's been great
over the last few years, and we will continue to do so.
I am so pleased that Stan Farrow is joining us again on Camversation to raise more money for charity. We're running 2 sessions on abstracts, backgrounds and beyond. This is going to be talking about Stan's workflow, his approaches, his editing, his blend modes, and also how he creates his wonderful backdrops and props. Should be loads of fun.